think, yes. The machines are talking to each other. Now let us talk to each other. So, right, this is the only time we meet this week. The opposite of last week for the other class. Okay, so next week, I should have brought your papers so that you can get them out physically, all 7 of you. But you can come by the office and get them. They'll be in a box. Those of you who turned your stuff in online, remind me if you haven't seen grades reflected for the other stuff that you've turned in. Still catching up. People still handing in midterms.
Were we supposed to take our midterms last week?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the week before, actually. We're
Okay.
in week 9 now, so they were due back in week 8. So, but stuff happens. Random and anomalous events occur. People have lives. So, you getting signal or? Okay, all right, cool. All right, so last week we, the reason I'm really hip on this dimension of beings thing is because a lot of times people, their conception of who they are is probably the major block to moving on. And so, as an example, when you, if this is you, and I will take the drawing instructions to heart. This is you in your box, your conception of who you are, and basically you think of yourself as bounded by these, 6 different planes that conceptualize your reality. So, your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, your family relationships, your job, et cetera, et cetera. If you could do that, and just think of 6 different ways that you interact with the world, and they have multiple dimensions that you don't necessarily see. So, personally, for example, I'm a drug counselor, but that has already evolved beyond what that used to be 30 years ago, because the field changed and people's needs changed. So a number of us talk about, okay, what has happened educationally in the schools is the schools were designed to teach students whose families were together enough to teach them the basics of how to operate in society, and gave them their identity and coping skills. And then they were basically then supposed to be ready for school, already showing up, knowing their ABCs and their times tables and how to play nice with others and share and all the stuff that, Robert Fulghum talks about is all I needed to know in life was in kindergarten, blah-de-blah-de-blah, right. Okay, but when certain other forces within society started unraveling the family, who's there to teach people that? So one of the things that we're looking at is, okay, what would relationship school look like? Because that's one of the things like we're dealing with, is people who are grieving something. Like, okay, you might take a grief workshop if you have the money, but most of the time you don't. So who teaches you how to do that? And you're not just grieving people dying, you're also grieving the loss of something, some part of your identity. How do you get it back? And so that you're functioning. Because a lot of times you basically are functioning in crisis, from crisis to crisis to crisis. So part of that is kind of like a limitation, like a cage. And people actually even describe their lives like that, like a cage, in terms of looking at addictive behavior. So what I was trying to do is say, all right, the answer to your question might be outside of the box that you already exist in. You're already out of the box just by being able to formulate the question. Now all you have to do is act as if you know the answer. Because some of your words are leading me to believe you know the answer. Well, what do you mean by that? Explain it to me in concrete terms. Okay, do this. Oh, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do anything spiritual. Okay, let's reframe it so that it's not spiritual. But it's the same thing. It's a series of actions. You're operating outside of the box. You can explain it a bunch of different ways, and so what becomes the block is how you think you are in the world, as an example. So not just thinking, but also feeling and being. So in the dimensions of being piece, the idea is, okay, you think and feel, that's a baby. I'm dealing with a 2-year-old, and you can see this extending into 3, where they start getting really whiny and crying as a mode of getting what they want. And say, until you say, okay, use your words, or, well, now they've got the words, so don't ask in that tone of voice. We're willing to give you that. So think and feel. Think, feel, and do, child, without necessarily thinking about consequences. Think, feel, and do, reflect, and project the adolescent. This is the point at which the forebrain or angel brain is beginning to start operating, and so you can project into the future and connect present actions with future consequences. Unless, for example, you have been affected by what's called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, in which you may look quote unquote normal, but the actual brain connections that allow you to connect present and past with future consequences isn't there. So you just think, do, without consequences. You're impulsive, and you can be led. You can actually be, have that kind of thing, that think, do, without fetal alcohol syndrome, just by stunting your education or limiting, limiting your outlook.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Oh, so I was always taught fetal alcohol syndrome, the person kind of looked like a spider monkey or something. Like there was
Yes.
a physical thing.
That's why our thinking is that it's a spectrum. Okay? What we used to call full-blown FAS is basically you could actually have a deformity of the face where, like, if it's a white kid, they have epicanthic folds like they're Asian. This is what's called Down syndrome. Like fetal alcohol syndrome was actually the largest cause, not largest cause, but the most preventable cause of what we used to call developmental retardation, because that's how it happened. So what Sir Robert Downes, I am repeating myself, but it was a different class. So as Sir Robert Downes, British physician, was observing white people who were exposing their kids to alcohol, because the concept of addiction didn't exist in that part of the 19th century. Remember, from Candace Burt's book, we didn't even have a germ theory in Western medicine. We didn't connect in the United States. Fetal alcohol syndrome didn't even exist as a term until 1978. Right? So in the 1800s, where they're just drinking, and they're drinking all through the pregnancy, producing these kids where they already had this racial conception that whites were superior, Caucasoid, then Mongoloid, okay, the next people who devolved from white people, then Negroid, right? So white racial superiority. So Down syndrome, when they're referring to Mongoloid idiots, they're not describing Asian kids. They're describing white kids with fetal alcohol syndrome. But they didn't have the language to say that, right? And they didn't have a concept of addiction then. right? So, nor do they have a concept of sanitation and hygiene. Okay, right, and these are the people that we learned from, or at least, this is why we're the English-speaking world, Again, that we learned our stuff from the British and we refined it in some ways and in some ways not so much. So the reason we call it a spectrum, and so fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, that includes kids that we used to call FAE. That is, they wouldn't have the classic FAS face, okay? But the brain damage was hidden. They looked normal, but the brain was affected in terms of their development as well as having some glandular stuff, so they couldn't connect consequences because the connections weren't actually there. And we had to have MRI devices that could image the brain to actually see that, which, we didn't have until recently in all this, right? So that's why I can say, look, you're training to be a pro, this stuff changes and our understanding changes every 6 months. Really, literally. Now, just like that question in the midterm, okay, we've only proven genetic predisposition with alcohol, and the only way we can say that we've proved it is we've done the scientific work. Could that happen with other drugs? Hell yeah. But you can't study an illegal drug for longitudinal. You can't allow people to use something that, is harmful for them, that's illegal, right? That's an ethical problem. Like, okay, maybe we could get around that and you could volunteer, but how's that going to happen? Okay? All we can say with, for example, like cocaine, yeah, it makes monsters. Methamphetamine used during pregnancy makes monsters, definitely. Weed doesn't make monsters. What are the deficits? We need to study that. Because I know kids that, their mom smoked all through their pregnancy, and they're brilliant kids if short-tempered and impatient. Is that they're teenagers or what? Or two? Whatever. I don't know. Again, we need to study, right? So obviously many of the danger things that the anti-drug people talk about, which aren't really scientific or stretching the science, certainly we can't say there's no effect, but we can't also, on the other hand, emphasize the negative effects. So, so that's FAS, fetal alcohol spectrum. We used to also have a term back in the day, FADE, fetal alcohol and other drug effects, because rarely do people actually just use one drug. I mean, it happens, but people use multiple drugs. So, basically the physiology, usually we talk about this in the treatment class, but as civilians, you should know that because of how the blood interface between mom and baby works, they only share her liver. So basically, whatever mom does, baby does at least twice of. And it stays in longer because they only got one liver. That's part of why, the legal drinking age is 21, because your liver is fully developed by 21, unless you do things to impede it. Not that this is generally known, but so part of that, those dimensions of being, think, feel, do, reflect, project, can be affected by your exposure to chemicals at which particular time. But, you can also begin to compensate for them with other skills. So think, feel, do, reflect, project, proact, act, react, which is an adult point of view where you basically have built some skills from be able to project the future so that you can also predict that things are going to happen and prepare for them. And then look at going beyond the adult level of reacting to responding in a way that is calm. So with crisis training, or basically being able to calm yourself and soothe yourself, if you're continually in a crisis, be able to respond from a thoughtful place without being carried away by the crisis emotional reaction around you. Say, okay, this is what needs to happen. And then resonate, resound, literally, that doesn't necessarily mean sing or whistling in the dark, but it also means that you can, the only way I can say it, or a way I can say it in English, is that you can affect the atmosphere around you, the situation around you, by being calm and moving it towards the way that is optimal by practicing it yourself. So that's a level of practicing self-mastery. And then you can be a teacher. Once you've mastered self-mastery, you can teach others to master themselves. And at that level, you're being the change you want to see in the world, like Gandhi had talked about, among others. And Albert. So that's dimension 6, dimension 7 and beyond. Basically, they're game changers. So many names, and we basically know them by their classic names, like they found religions or whatever, perform what are miracles. But I would point out to you that they're simply applying higher science. Science is the collection of basically questions, being able to ask a question, formulate an answer, and have it be tested through repetition and practice. So, as an example, if all you know how to do, the only way you know how to make fire is rubbing sticks together, matches look like magic. And if the only way you know how to make fire is using matches, a lighter looks like magic. And if all you have is a lighter, basically electricity and electric range looks like magic. And a nuclear power plant, and so on, right? So there are higher laws of and higher dimensions of human beings and humanity. So you don't necessarily have to be a mystic to appreciate them or understand them. You don't even have to be an Einstein. But if I were to consult Einstein, so this is his answer to how do we face racism and anti-Semitism. This is his answer to a rabbi who asked on behalf of his daughter. And remember, this is Einstein, who, if you didn't know this, was a fervent anti-racist activist. Not always known about it, but he was, like, fervent. Well, he's a genius, so racists are not genius usually, but, he's a genius. So, a human being is part of the whole, called by us the universe, limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a prison, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons close to us. So if we were talking about, right, this is a prison, and this is you in the middle of this box, well, your prison is you think you're separate, and that only the people that get inside of the box are real. And he's saying this is an optical delusion of consciousness. You're actually connected. You just only focus on what's in the box. Our task must be to free ourselves from our prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all humanity and the whole of nature and its beauty. So he's talking about your connection to other people, and sometimes that means if they bring messes to you to clean up and you become adept at cleaning up those messes in your own life, or cleaning up those messes for others, humanity is messy. They are. They bring stuff. You know, people who should be loyal to you betray you or hurt you, intentionally or unintentionally. Serve them anyway. Actually, there's this book, Anyway. I'll read a few quotes from it later, but great book. Anyway, you know, do good. People put you down for doing good. Do good anyway. Nobody's able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself part of the liberation and a foundation for inner security. So he said you might not, you know, remember what I said the other day about perfection is not flawlessness. Albert is saying you need to try and do it, because that frees you by itself. It's not going to be perfect. But part of the perfection is in learning. That's how you learn, by making mistakes. Getting it right. You get to practice it over and over and over until you get it right. And you might be getting it right with your last dying breath. But hey, that's okay too. All right. Have any of you heard about imaginal cells? That's no? Okay. This is another thing that I like in terms of using scientific discoveries as metaphor that I have just recently heard about, but apparently this discovery was found in the 90s. So one of the things that I had always wondered, that we always talked about, and I actually used to work for this program called chrysalis, is, okay, chrysalis is the stage before, the butterfly comes in. So let's say your addiction is the chrysalis, and boom, we're going to liberate you from that, right? So I've seen that image a lot, and people talking about, butterflies and chrysalises and coming out of your cocoon or whatever. But we didn't really know the actual process about how that worked, where that came from. So this phrase imaginal work, there are actual imaginal cells. So any creature that goes through metamorphosis has imaginal cells. Any creature that does that. Now, humans don't necessarily go through metamorphosis, but they do, sorry for using a big word, recapitulate ontogeny. The phrase is phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny. That is, the individual goes through the evolution of the species. Okay? We are trillions of cells, multicellular life, that started out when two cells joined each other, and then as the multicellular being, we had gills at one point. We became like turtles at one point, amphibians. We became like mammals at one point. All this transformation, the embryo goes through in becoming a human fetus, and then boom, we're human. But at one point, we had gills. And if my children were born by water birth, so basically the theory behind that is you're connected to oxygen until you breach the air, and then your lungs kick in. But until you breach water into air, you are connected by the umbilical cord and you're getting oxygen. So there's, we've seen movies of babies swimming around, still attached to the umbilicus, not breaking air, where they're born into a pool. So France and the Soviet Union, and they're actually now birthing tubs that that midwives bring for you to do that, if that works. So, imaginal work. So, the story. The caterpillar's new cells are called imaginal cells. They resonate, this is kind of new agey, but hey, whatever. They resonate at a different frequency. They are so totally different from the caterpillar's cells that his immune system thinks they are enemies and gobbles them up, chomp, gulp. But these new imaginal cells continue to appear, more and more of them. And the way this looks like on an electron microscope, it literally is, they seem to come out of nowhere. Literally, nowhere. So they're definitely part of the DNA. but they start to appear out of nowhere. So pretty soon the caterpillar immune system cannot destroy them fast enough. More and more the imaginal cells survive, and then an amazing thing happens. The little tiny imaginal cells start to clump together into friendly little groups. They all resonate together at the same frequency, passing information from one to another. Then after a while, another amazing thing happens. The clumps of imaginal cells start to cluster together. A long string of clumping and clustering imaginal cells, all resonating with the same frequency, all passing information from one to another, there inside the chrysalis. A wave of good news travels through the system, lurches and heaves, but not yet a butterfly. Then at some point, the entire long string of imaginal cells suddenly realizes altogether that it is something different from the caterpillar, something new, something wonderful, and in that realization is the shout of the birth of the butterfly. Happy birthday, butterfly. Since the butterfly now knows that it is a butterfly, the little tiny imaginal cells no longer have to do all those things individual cells must do. Now they are part of a multi-celled organism, a family who can share the work. Each new butterfly cell can take on a different job. There is something for everyone to do, and everyone is important. And each cell begins to do just that very thing it is most drawn to do. And every other cell encourages it to do just that. A great way to organize a butterfly. So, in less flowery language, here's what happens. The caterpillar eats, and then creates a cocoon or chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, what happens is the caterpillar dissolves, physically dissolves, into basically goo. That's undifferentiated. It's goo. The caterpillar structure is gone. Out of that goo, the imaginal cells basically start emerging. And the immune system of the caterpillar, which is still there, starts attacking them. And at first, it is successful in suppressing the imaginal cells, but more and more of them start coming out of nowhere and clumping together. They're too big to eat. And then they start organizing once they've clumped, and then they use the immune system of the caterpillar for food and to make more imaginal cells. So here's what the deal is, all right? The new organism still has to breathe, but it doesn't need 10 legs. It only needs 6. It will need eyes. It will need antenna. It will need wings, all of which the caterpillar never had. So you still need a nervous system. You still need a brain. You still need all that. The imaginal cells basically create the structure of the butterfly from the raw material of the caterpillar. This is all a function of DNA. The code is there, right? And they're metamorphosizing. So people have taken this knowledge, which basically was the precise mechanism was discovered really in the early 90s. Because I actually had Googled the labs that looked at this process in fruit flies and other things that do that, and they're coming out of nowhere. We can see them now. They seem to come out of nowhere, and they've watched them gobble up the old, larval cells and become a flying creature. So some New Agers basically took to this and said, oh, this is a model for transformation and social transformation, because what happens is, if you become conscious and aware and free of your addiction, and you're living in a society that promotes addictions as part of its gross national product, you're an enemy. They're going to attack you any way they can. This is not paranoia. This is just a natural process of metamorphosis. I don't know if this actually exists. It seems to be like a crop circle kind of thing. Okay? I don't think the aliens made this, but whatever. So, imaginal beings in a transformed world, butterflies and all that. This is a meme using Da Vinci's awakened person, multi-dimensional being. So, as we were talking about the wisdom way of the teacher, the mode of the warrior showing up fully, mind, heart, and spirit. The healer, pay attention to what has heart and meaning. The visionary, tell the truth without blame or judgment. And the teacher, open to outcome, not attached to outcome. Now, if you are doing any one of these modes, and you're a truth teller, you're a warrior, you're a healer, don't expect them to accept those changes in you. And you can select how you're going to be, to what degree you're going to be a troublemaker to show up, if you're going to show up. Sometimes just your presence is necessary. And choosing your words carefully. So telling the truth without blame and judgment. Sorry I was late. I was seeing a client, and I got a visit from somebody that thanked me for my testimony yesterday, which was basically on the social host ordinance. And it was basically saying, there were like, maybe 100 students from the university that were kind of against it. And I actually had a one-on-one conversation with an African-American student from the U of O who'd seen some of my conference. I did a conference this last weekend. So I said, this is why I'm testifying, okay? Part of your problem with these parties is that people are binge drinking in mass, 700 of them. So 700 drunk people in the street is a problem. You do not have the right to get obliterated. It's not in the Constitution. However, if you drank less than legally drunk, we don't have a problem. There's no litter problem. You don't have to call the police. The ordinance allows the social host to call the cops if it gets out of hand. So it's not as draconian as you may think. But here's the basic value. Why do you think drinking a case of beer or 12 microbrew pints at a party is normal behavior? Why do you think that? Where'd you get that idea? Not from us, not from the medical community. The drug dealers, and then we get called out because, you're calling them drug dealers. That's so prohibitionist. No. I'm not in recovery. I'll have a tall one every once in a while, but come on, not to drink, not to get drunk. I don't trust people. Sorry. People act crazy. Wisdom way of the teacher. Open to outcome, not attached to outcome. So in Japanese, sensei, which is often used for a teacher, it means one who has gone before. So the teachers follow a certain path, and they often teach what they know, or they often teach what they most need to know. So not just what they know, but what they most need to know. So learning often what they teach just ahead of the student. So that in that sense of one who has gone before, a sensei. So introduction to addictive behavior is not simply to teach you facts, but also have you learn about yourself. So whether you succeed in giving it up is not the point. The effort to try is instructive by itself. Particularly in the things, give up sugar or give up the internet or give up, Farmville or give whatever it is, whatever the piece is. So true mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. Lao Tzu. So the way of the teacher accesses the human resource of wisdom, according to Angie. So whether an established school system or an apprenticeship, the process of learning and teaching is universal. So traditionally, medicine people taught the healing ways involving plants, nutrition, diet, meditation, right livelihood, right relationship with other living beings. In this society, we lost that because it's too young to develop that, and America is really about cutting yourself off from your roots in favor of a consumerist model. I mean, you look at what the traditional, when they say, when Rush Limbaugh and those folks talk about the traditional values, they're only talking about values that are a couple of 100 years old. Because the traditional form of the family is extended. Like mom, dad, biological kids, grandpas, aunties, uncles, etc., all living in close proximity together on the same piece of land. All that ended with the Industrial Revolution, that's what caused the nuclear family. Because dad, or whoever, the breadwinners, or the tofu winners, whatever, had to leave the farm to go to the cities and work at wage jobs. That became normal. But it's not traditionally normal. We are basically designed by the way we've lived for 10,000 years, not the last 200. So, they showed their apprentices and their extended family members how to live. And this is unfortunately what I was saying at the top of the class, is that we kind of lost that. That socialization is where the first public schools came out of. The students had already been prepared because they already knew their ABCs and how to write cursive. Like, do we even teach writing cursive writing anymore? In school? They do still? Okay. Because I've heard resistance from some students saying, all I need to know is how to sign my name to write checks. Yeah, well, otherwise I can type it. No. There's a mind-body skill involved in writing. That's why you do it. So the guiding principle for the teacher, according to Arian, is to be open to outcome, not attached to outcome. So I can tell you the principles which underlie the medical condition called addiction. I can teach you everything I know, or that is known, or at least we think we know, on how to prevent it, slow it, stop it, treat it, recover from it. So, and I stack the deck with information. Sometimes it's overwhelming, I know. Stories, pictures, whatever I know that works, and I only give you what works because I've seen it work. And at least myself, if not someone else. So, to ensure the chances of a certain outcome, you will be healthier and less addicted. Now, that doesn't always happen. It's okay. Still people take the class, become even more strung out, knowing this, I can't be attached to the outcome. They have their own journey. Damn it. So, the teacher accesses wisdom, tries to resonate with universal wisdom, which resides in the student. The teacher uses trust and understands the need for detachment, also known as boundaries. So I can't live your life for you. How you live your life is not for me to judge. It's not that I don't care. It's just that it doesn't make sense to care way more about your life than you do by your actions. So this is frequently the dilemma of anyone who's in a codependent relationship. You love the addict or the alcoholic or whatever, or the process addict. You love them, but they are living in a way that is killing the best in them and potentially the best in you. The solution for you to live in an optimal way no matter what they do. And it's difficult to do this, and especially in proximity to them unless you have great inner resources. And so the wisdom way of the teacher is to show you that you have those inner resources by demonstrating themselves, that they have them, or not. Sometimes the teacher is coyote way. Now, coyote in Native American psychological practice creates the universe. And coyote, and creating the universe, also does the stupidest thing that usually gets him killed. Because he creates the universe, he can come back. And he's showing you by doing the stupidest thing, the smart thing to do. So it's a contrary way. The way of the teacher is a practice and trust that the resources exist and the student will access them. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they refuse to see them. And it's interesting when that happens. I actually talked with some person today that, look, you can take a workshop and you can take lots of workshops, but you're already there. Well, why can't I see that? Yeah. Ask yourself, why can't you see that? What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything. Then do it. I see the capability in you. You've demonstrated this. Now I want to take a workshop. Okay. So trust is the container which holds clarity, objectivity, discernment, detachment. Wisdom is at work when we are open to all options. What this is, in case you were wondering, is a rock crystal dodecahedron. That's a 12-sided figure built of pentagons on a crystal matrix plate. So five things: clarity, objectivity, discernment, detachment, and wisdom underlying all of them. So clarity, describing what you see clearly. Objectivity, being able to clearly describe it no matter what its relationship is to you, so that you don't cloud your vision. Discernment, noticing that things are different. Discernment is different than discrimination. They're related. So discernment is clearly seeing something is. So the table is different than the chair. They're both on the floor. That's discernment. Discrimination is putting a value judgment on what those differences are. Bad chair, good chair, stupid table, dumb ceiling. Okay? Discrimination, putting a value judgment. You know, like like wine. Some wine is any wine is better than Thunderbird or Red Mountain. Or wine that costs $24 a bottle. Not that I drink that stuff, but that's discrimination. Alcohol is alcohol. Trust is the container which holds clarity, objectivity, discernment, detachment. Wisdom is at work when we're open to all options. This is a graphic that's in a church in Oakland. The baptizing of the Ethiopian from Acts. Trust is being comfortable with uncertainty. So accessing universal wisdom by learning how to trust and be comfortable with states of not knowing. Sometimes you can't know, or the knowledge is going to reveal itself slowly. Being patient until clarity is achieved. So as an example, the word confusion. Things are fused Con means together or with. Things are so together you can't tell them apart. And that's what's confusing. You can't make the distinction. As an example, we actually talk about this in the treatment class, but there's a term called concretization. So this is a concrete support wall that has been painted white. If it hadn't been painted, what color would it be? Concrete color, which is? Gray. So gray is neither black or white, right? Can you tell that there is sand and rocks? Can you see individual sand and rocks in the concrete? Probably not. Though there is concrete where you can see the individual sand and the rocks. There is, right? So concretization is a stage in a client where they cannot see their feelings. They're all confused. And they'll actually say, I'm confused. Well, what are you confused about? Okay, so until they're able to pick out individual feelings within that mishmash of feelings, you can't necessarily make progress until they're able to, using discernment, pick out individual feelings, and then you can move on those things. Get what I'm saying? So concretization, they can't tell any difference between any feelings. It's a mishmash. And you can basically follow a thread of feeling once they can identify like a single or other feelings. That's why I often go with anger, because it's almost always there. And they don't always want to talk about it. I have anger issues. Yeah, well, you should, based on what happened to you. Okay? Being detached from your fears, i.e. being aware of them but not necessarily run by them, involves trust. Okay? Because that's part of the uncertainty. We don't like being uncertain. We like knowing stuff. And that uncertainty is a form of fear. What's going to happen? Worry about it when it happens. But pay attention. Because you can see what's going to happen if you're paying attention to what's happening now. With sufficient clarity. So, it's not being about being cold and aloof. It's being present in the position of the silent witness, which is open to what's being said by the still small voice and what is being done and said around you. So if you recall, I think a few weeks back when I was talking about natural mind, they're basically the various forms of literature refer to the spiritual part of a human being as being at least manifest in two ways. The silent witness, which is watching what is going on without comment, and then the still small voice, which might comment, but comment in an optimal way. And you actually have to quiet yourself down enough to be able to hear them, but you did hear. A voice within me said, I shouldn't have done that. And I knew it was right, but I did it anyway. So, you're standing in the middle of this river, and this guy's going to baptize you. Can you swim? Can you swim? Is he going to drown you? How long is he going to hold me down? Some people have abuse memories from this very act, holding you down. Boy, this water is cold. Is this going to hurt? So our relationship with the teacher. So by analogy, since I already did baptism, by analogy, if you're going to learn to basically operate in water and develop a sense of trust, it's good to have a swim teacher, an inner swim teacher or an outer swim teacher, how to swim in the waters of life that change. So flat water, swim laps on the surface, repetitive, self-care can make you stronger. So basically the idea of doing the same thing over and over that makes you stronger as an exercise. Flat water, meaning there's no currents. It's sanitized. No currents, no waves, no motion. Teaches you how the basic things of how to swim. Hold your breath underwater. Hold your breath. Stroke, basic strokes. Back and forth. So that fear you feel in the deep water, we'll just swim through it. Go back to shallow. Or maybe you like to hang out in the deep water. I like to hang out in the deep water. But, hey, not everybody's cup of tea. So the difference between swimming laps in flat water basically gives you water skills and breath control. Running a river, very popular here in this state, right? Because we got lots of water to do that. Running a river, operating skillfully and safely in chaos. Because life is chaotic. In fact, living systems are chaotic. They change. They change direction unpredictably. Or predictably if you hang out with them long enough to find out which way they go. So, river running, operating skillfully and safely in chaos. Big wave surfing, taking a stand and moving on that stand through chaos safely. Even if you wipe out. Which, if you know how to handle wipeouts, it's okay. Okay, so in river rafting, after you have learned to swim, personal safety in turbulence. There's an African proverb that says, calm seas do not make skillful sailors. How do you deal with storms? Storms happen. I was looking at a map yesterday on CNN, and it was describing the British Empire. And the British dug the Suez Canal to get all this stuff from their colonies without going around Africa. And Africa is one of the most turbulent water, especially Southern Africa, is like one of the most turbulent places on earth to sail. They call it like the Cape of Good Hope. Well, it's Cape of Good Hope because ships get lost there because there's 100-foot waves there. You know, I actually know somebody that was on an aircraft carrier, which, you know, is 100 feet above the water, and, you know, during storms, 100-foot waves would, like, wash over the deck. Ship made it, but, you know, they was always worried about the ship getting crunched. Yeah, 100-foot wave, sure, they exist in places. So, the British dug the Suez Canal through the Gulf, and all the shipping goes up through there, not around Africa. But before that was dug, the only way to get to the other side of Africa was going through that. So calm seas do not make skillful sailors. Now this, that's about a 60-foot wave there. 40 to 60-foot wave, which Hawaii they measure from the back, not the face. So a 40 to 60-foot wave has maybe 80 to 100 feet worth of face. So we talk about reading water, and we talk about that in river rafting, for example. So if you ever do a float on the Mackenzie or something like that, where there's different types of rapids, is being able to perceive what's below the surface in reading water. So in flat water, you don't have to read the water. You do have to know how to breathe and keep your head in deep water where you can't stand up. In natural bodies of water, you have to see what's coming and being able to respond quickly to changing conditions. And sometimes you can foresee the changes coming and prepare. So for example, in river rafting, and the reason I'm using this as a metaphor is for life, is that in rivers you can see when there's a hump in the water, there's a rock under making the hump. that old adage about still waters run deep. Well, you can tell the depth of the water because it's quiet, or at least there's no rocks within the surface making whitewater. Whitewater rafting is, there's rocks, there's drops, there's holes. Usually, definitely at the bottom of a falls, there's holes and there's a force going to be there to suck you under, flip your boat. How do you get yourself out of that particular disaster? When it's predictable. Okay, certain disasters are predictable. Okay, certain things in life are recurring. Get ready for them, right? Albert said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over without changing it.
And that was that, it was said autobiography in 5
Yeah,
chapters.
right. Portia Nelson piece about, I keep falling into this hole until I take responsibility and see the hole coming. Or, oh, now I walk down another street. Not the same street where the hole is. So I decided to take a risk and throw you another complex metaphor. Might be useful for you. So in the Navajo way, anger is a holy force. This is a shout out to Arlie Naskai, who we were basically working gangs. And he wanted to basically make the distinction between anger management and other forms of dealing with anger. So one of the ways we called this was anger resolution. Because in anger management, they simply just want you to be compliant to the system, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily deal with your anger. So anger resolution is where you look at where your anger is and dissolve it. So in the Navajo way, anger is a holy force. It has to be honored and transformed, approached with respect and reverence. So, for example, a relative consumed with anger turns into a monster. And we often fear the monsters our children and loved ones become because they've been consumed with anger. They're blind with rage. We notice that phrase. Blind with rage. They can't see their rage. They're consumed by it. So, true story. A man has a recurring dream of his brother's murderer. It reminds him of the video game Doom, which is a point-of-view game in which you take the view of the shooter. He is the shooter in his dream who kills his brother and one other and manages to shoot a number of other people in his dream, which is like recurring. Takes the point of view of the shooter in Doom. In the dream, which occurs nightly, after the murder, he can hear the thoughts of the monster as he selects targets and who he shoots and who he spares and why. At the trial, certain details of the dream are corroborated by the district attorney. They are facts known only to the shooter and not released to the press before or after the trial. Was the dream real? It's a question could be asked. Was he actually tuning into the killer's thoughts? What is the purpose of him having a recurring dream like this? Is he crazy? What would Western psychology tell him to do? Take two Prozac and come back next week? 150, please? All right, so this is a real event. These are real events. This stuff happens. People experience that. This is out of the realm of Western psychology. Western psychology, they just snapped. They actually even have a cable television show, Snapped. Really? It's obvious what's happening here. You can say, you have an anger management problem. Right, okay. So how do you manage it? You don't know? Okay, let's go to some place that's older than you. Just saying. So, of course the dream is real. You're not crazy. You're experiencing a level of reality that is difficult to process fully while you're awake. A purpose of the dream would be to teach you how to see other monsters before they go off. There are a lot of them. That would be a useful skill, huh? Western psychology teach you to do that? Not even in their framework. So he is seeing inside the monster as if he were both monster slayer and born for water. So there's a thing of beauty that can come from this tragedy. So I'll tell you the story of monster slayer and born for water, or born of water, okay, within this framework. So this is not just a Navajo mythology story. In their way, it's their form of psychology. Okay? So the telling of the stories gives you the pattern for living. So, monster slayer and born of water. Child born of water. So, they are twin sons, S-O-N-S, of the sun, S-U-N, and changing woman. Changing woman's the earth. So they're the sons of the earth and the sun. Monster slayer is the warrior. He enters the heart of the monster using courage, using the weapon of courage. And he enters the heart of the monster. So when these stories were created, they're basically, the motif is, basically there are these monsters that are eating the people. And the son tells them in their training that the monsters are your relatives. But maybe not anymore. Meaning they have been consumed by their anger so much, your relatives have been consumed by their anger so much that they're doing unspeakable things from that anger. Okay, so the way to slay them, right? A warrior has to approach and penetrate into the place, even be eaten by the monster, to see inside the monster's heart. To see inside your enemy's heart, your adversary's heart. And then, as he's about to die after being consumed, the healer, born of water, child born of water, appears next to him, and using the healer's vision, sees the way out that the monster can't see because the monster is blinded by rage. And at that moment, once the monster sees the way out of resolving the anger, they're slain. That is, they become something else. And in these stories, the monsters become a natural feature of the desert or some other thing. So the son, for example, as I said before, told them that they are brothers to the monsters they wish to kill, but that apparently is no more. They're relatives. He gave them agate to make them immune to injury, and gave them the garments and weapons they'd asked for. The older one, Monster Slayer, got dark flint, and the younger one, blue flint garments. So black obsidian and turquoise. Black obsidian for the warrior and turquoise for the healer. The son gave them prayer sticks, so that is like smudge sticks as you know in English. Told them that the younger of the two, born for water, would sit watching these prayer sticks while the older Monster Slayer went out to kill the monsters. If these prayer sticks stuck in the ground began to burn by themselves, this would signal that his brother was in danger and that he should go to him and help. So basically, you need the warrior to penetrate in the place where people are scared to go. Just like go there. That's why I talked about in algebra, pain, loss, and fear. Go to the center of the greatest pain. Go to the place you're scared of. Go directly to the center of it, immediately. Do the thing you're afraid of. And look. Overcome your fear with courage. Fear and despair. And then you need the healer's vision once you're in the middle of that. So, using the weapons given them by their father, the monster is slain, but his remains become a natural feature, a thing of beauty. So, for example, Big God's blood, when they went up against the monster called Big God, it's the lava around Mount Taylor. Bird monster carried Monster Slayer to his nest at Ship Rock, which pictured to the left. Bird monster and his mate were slain by Monster Slayer. Their two children in the nest were transformed by Monster Slayer into eagle and owl. Seeing far in the day, seeing far at night. So this is a sand painting of a monster slayer. So common in human mythology is the hero is slaying the monster and the monster becoming something useful or beautiful. So Pegasus, for example, the winged horse, came from Medusa, the Gorgon. So when we talk about, in this construct, crossing the river of anger, the chasm is the gap between you and the monster's world. And in order, if the monster is you, or, you're standing at one end of the chasm, and across the river is where your needs are. So this is almost like Maslow, where you have to identify your needs and reach them. So imagine a fast-moving river with slippery stones protruding above the surface. The stones cross the river, but they are slippery. They're like emotions. Emotions are slippery. And also within this framework, emotions can shapeshift. In addition to being slippery, they can change form, become a different animal. They can leave tracks of one thing and then transform and be the tracks of another to trick you. So in the Navajo construct, anger is a combination of sadness and fear. And that there's different intensities of anger. So for example, on your side of the river is the knowledge of how to meet the human needs behind the anger that created the monster in the first place. That's the needs. This is you. The stones in the river are slippery emotions. One leads to the next and the next until you're on the other side of the chasm gap, and that has been closed. So for example, you look at your feelings. I feel depressed. Boom. There's a stone. When I feel depressed, I do desperate things. Because I don't want to be depressed. So I'll eat, or you'll do whatever you do. I feel powerless when I feel depressed. So I want to feel power. I don't like being powerless. So I'll do something else. So from depressed, we get to another stone, desperate, powerless. Oh, powerless leads to hopeless. That's a form of sadness. So you basically identify the stones till you get to your needs. It's a psychological journey. Crossing the river of anger. So here we basically looked at a construct for, okay, if I were going to apply this, I've identified a bunch of emotions that used to have me confused because I wasn't able to identify them singly. And so there's also intensities of anger. So there's low, or irritated, bugged, disturbed, annoyed, bothered, upset, medium, pissed, indignant, resentful, and then high, enraged, hateful, vicious. So if you see that behavior in other people, that level and intensity of anger, if you were going to help them out of it, you basically talk about the feelings that within this particular construct, if you want to use this, that is behind the viciousness and the hatefulness and all the other things. And taking it as a combination of sadness and fear, move across to meeting their needs of wanting to feel safe. So a more basic skill is, can you swim in a flood of emotions? So sometimes you don't actually, the river's running high, so there aren't even any rocks to walk across on, slippery or not. Can you swim in a flood of emotions? If you're in quicksand, can you float on your back long enough to get to solid ground? How can you catch your breath or slow your breath down? Can you even breathe? So attend to the basics first. Breathe. Slow your breath down. You don't know what to do? Slow your breath down. Get your head above water, slow your breath down, and when you get to a safe enough place, get out of the situation. Take care of yourself. So, if the tools of your culture that your culture gives you do not help you to cross the river of change or the river of anger or leads you in circles, perhaps you can borrow tools from another culture. So, some cultural tools cannot be used by someone outside of the culture. You may have to change to become part of that culture, and are you up to it? Culture of addiction doesn't really talk about this stuff. So that's why I borrowed this. And I ran into somebody that, that person, that was a real experience. And my training was inadequate. The answers of Western psychology were inadequate. So it's an old thing about, to go back to Einstein and his folks. He escaped this, but there was a rabbi that talked about he survived the death camps. His entire family had been wiped out as well as his congregation. Why should I live? We know psychologically one response to genocide, if you're a survivor, is survivor's guilt. And you want to kill yourself. Like finish the job whoever started. Well, he had to find meaning. His suffering had to find meaning. He had to find meaning and a purpose. Why did I live? Okay, you lived partially to hold their memories and make sure that this doesn't happen again. That purpose enough? That's pretty big right there. As an example. This is Arlie's anger cycle model. So he basically talks about the incident, what happened. You had angry feelings. You can identify what those angry feelings are and the level of intensity. You can skip to brief relief or identify losses and fear. So you have sadness because you lost something. You fear to lose other things. Identify those things. So brief relief. Basically, you punish, in brief relief, it's a pattern where you punish yourself or others, usually by using or engaging in some addictive behavior. Or, in that cycle, if you skip to brief relief, I feel the pain, I'm going to drown my sorrows, boom, brief relief puts you back into your real needs are still unmet, you stay in the cycle. Your experience reinforces the feelings and beliefs of being frustrated, powerless, fearless, fearful, confused, hopeless, etc. Your attitude, you'll be defensive or hostile when people try and talk to you about it or not. And then you have another incident and you're in the cycle again. So, to get out of the cycle, you identify your unmet needs. And you choose or take action to meet your needs. That takes you out of the cycle. Needs begin to be met, movement out of the cycle. Simple way of conceptualizing it, but he's basically trying to take Western psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, speak to an audience that's not Navajo. And we were basically using this with gang kids. So Harrison Owen, philosopher, series of sayings, whoever is present are the right people to be there. Whenever we start, it's always the right time. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened. And when it's over, it's over. Let it go. Can you accept the experience of what it is and deal with it creatively as basic raw material to be transformed into something else? Acceptance is a sign of detachment. Resignation is a sign of attachment where you're resigned to something and you're not going to change it. And your needs are not being met either. Still part of the wisdom way of the teacher and the healer. So I think we've actually seen this kind of stuff. I'm just reiterating it because in terms of looking at your feelings, basically the Navajo way, just like most Native American healing constructs, basically start with an understanding of identifying your emotions first. And healing them. So in emotional literacy, how many emotions can you name or identify, and what do you do when they change? Your body is where you live by, where you're conscious, where are you when you're not conscious is another question you could ask. Mind includes your thoughts, theories, memories, drives, ego programming. I am this body, these feelings, these thoughts, this history, and no more, and visions of the future. So, the addictive search basically happens when something is missing, but you don't know what it is. So you look for the missing pieces in addictive experiences, trying to duplicate or chase the high or peak experience you found or heard of. But there are rules, like in pharmacology, like gravity, what goes up comes down, what gets you high doesn't get you as high the more you keep doing it, even when you do more. So there's tolerance both to ingestive addictions and process addictions. So other addictive experiences, which include cyber addictions, television, gambling, you adapt to them and have to do more to achieve the same brain reward, because it isn't always a high. So so sometimes actually it's not even a reward, you just keep doing it because it used to work and doesn't anymore, but you keep doing it because you don't know any other way to do it. And just becomes repetitive behavior, repetitive and ineffective behavior. So let's stop here and have a good Thanksgiving. Try to eat in balance and drink in balance. Stay in balance. Stay conscious.